Hi, do you remember your first two-wheeler? I certainly remember mine. It was a momentous occasion. Well, you're in luck. You might see your old bike today. We're at the Old Spokes Museum on Grosse Ile. Roger Gauthier is going to take us on a personal tour of his collection. So now we're going to look at the very next evolution in bicycles. Roger, what happened next?
In about 1930, three things kind of came together. Balloon tire bikes, wider tire bikes became popular. That's when chrome came along. Bright work prior to that on cars and bikes was polished nickel. And that was also the Art Deco era. So some styling really came into play that we didn't have before then. Yeah. The balloon tire bikes were very rugged built. There's an early one down there. It's a very rugged frame to the extent that when mountain bikes came along, it started with kids in Colorado, and they would only use Schwinn 1930s frames to ride down the mountains because they were the only thing that would hold up. Oh. So they were pretty darn rugged. Styling became incredible. This bike here is one of my favorites, the Elgin Bluebird, and Elgin was a Sears brand. Sears was the largest retailer of bicycles in the country, and before World War II, their bikes were branded Elgin. After World War II, they changed the brand name to J.C. Higgins. But what Sears did with this bike is they contracted with a designer, an industrial designer, Juan Randolphus, designed this bike specifically for years. And I think the styling on it is spectacular. If you look at the sweep of the frame design, built-in headlight, built-in speedometer, it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous bike. And think of the styling of cars of that era. I mean, this was light years above anything else they had. I mentioned that's when chrome came along. The Shelby Speedline airflow up there. If a little chrome was good, a lot was better. This is a very unique piece, the Evinrude Streamflow. Evinrude, of course, back then was very big into outboard motors, and they developed this technology working with aluminum. They decided to build the best bicycle in the world. So they did the Streamflow, and they made it out of aluminum. Very unique design. It's got a front suspension, it's got a built-in speedometer, headlight, and a real neat spring design. Remember, I mentioned earlier you never wanted to change the distance between your pedals and your seat. This seat's like a pogo stick connected to the pedals.
The whole thing, the whole mechanism moves.
So you could absorb the shock and still maintain that distance between the seat and the pedals. Excellent bike. There was only two problems with it. It was very expensive, and this was the height of the Depression, and they had a design flaw and they all broke. So what we're told, what we know is that Evinrude only built about 100 of them. They never built another bicycle. Most of them were scrapped out. There's only about a dozen known to exist. I got 3 of them, so.
Not bragging, but I got 3 of them.
Yeah, I got
now,
3.
where did it break? Where was the weak point? Was it in the frame, or?
Yeah, it was in the frame somewhere.
Okay. It sure looks bulletproof and solid to me.
It did. And the interesting thing is Monarch Bicycle Company built aluminum frame bikes and never had a problem with them.
Huh, interesting.
Did very well.
So maybe it was in the casting or the porosity of the material or something.
Well, you'd think they would have had the technology.
Yeah,
It's design flaw somewhere. But those bikes from the 1930s, look at the styling on those. They're just beautiful bikes. The Shelby Eagle, the Elgin Twin Bar, the Dayton Huffman Twin Flex with a front and rear suspension in it. Just beautiful bikes.
Really handsome.
Beautiful bikes.
And I noticed on this one, it's a 2-bar frame, but there's a beautiful aluminum casting and the lights. And is that a horn also in there, or is that just headlights?
That's just headlights.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Horn tanks were very, very popular. A lot of these bikes had tanks, and usually they had a horn built into the tank.
That's really something. And there's an Elgin that has its name on it. It almost looks like a weapon. The tank is shaped like a bomb. Is that a World War II vintage?
I think it's supposed to be a
dirigible.
Dirigible. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And that was 30s probably.
A lot of the designs copied motorcycles, and there's a Schwinn around the corner over there that's supposed to look like an airplane.
Okay. And
there was a lot of styling.
And there's a fascinating story about the manufacture of this unique bike here.
The Bowden Spacelander came along in 1960, and that was an attempt to build a more
certainly would stand out.
Type design, standout design. It's actually a 2-piece fiberglass construction, clamshell,
and that would be
with some
good,
metal reinforcement.
That'd be good for speed to build and manufacturing. Maybe less work. I don't know.
It was not cheap. $89.50 in 1960. It was not exorbitant, but it never really sold well. I think they only built about 500 of them, and they went out of business. They did have plans to build another different model, a 300 up there, but that never went in production. Any 300s by Bowden were assembled from parts.
Maybe in the factory when it closed, what they had left over.
So the 300 is very, very rare.
And how many calls do you get from other collectors saying, "Hey, Roger, will you sell me that bike?"
I had another 300, and I sold it.
Oh, you did? Okay. That's how you got your brand new Corvette, right?
Yeah, right. Interesting. This was not the Bowden was not a marketing success, but somebody in 1990 basically decided to remake it, reissue it, and that's a reissue in 1990, and it was about $3,000 when they came out with it. It didn't do very well.
It didn't do very well either?
It didn't do very well.
Okay.
So.
All right.
And bikes really in the 1930s had a lot of character. Basically, bicycle production stopped in about 1940 with the war. And they
probably everybody had military contracts that were manufacturing something.
And it's, of course, they started production back again in the late 1940s. They started producing bikes, and initially they pretty much built what they had built before the war. But then they started dressing the bikes up even more, and you got character bikes like the Hopalong Cassidy. And Donald Duck bikes. And
was there a region, Roger, where like Detroit at one time was motor capital of the world? Was there a region where a lot of bikes were built?
Out east, Massachusetts built a lot of bikes. There was a lot of manufacturing there, and actually Schwinn was, of course, very, very big, and they were in Chicago.
Okay.
So those are probably the two primary areas.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely some style in these bikes.
There was manufacturing in Ohio and Chicago.
It's almost like in this era, they had the basics down. They knew where the wheels were going to be, where the pedals were going to be, the seat and the handlebars. Now let's make our bike stand out. Let's make it stylish. You know, the design sells. It's almost like what's happened here.
Yep.
All right, good deal.
But if you look at these, I mentioned earlier the safety bikes standardized on that diamond frame design.
Right.
And if you look, these basically all have a diamond frame, about the same size wheels as that bike from 1890. Just dressed up a lot fancier.
Yeah, and every aspect is designed. There's nothing cookie cutter here. It's really a special design on all. Every manufacturer had a look. And maybe even a color scheme. Now we're going to go to post-war bikes, which are even wilder and more unique. Roger, we got a radio bike here. What do we got?
Well, Huffy built a radio bike, and it's just what it is. It has a built-in tube radio into it, and the power pack, battery pack was back there. It was interesting. It was 1955, and it's about when transistor radios came along, but they still used a tube radio in this bike. A lot of different iterations after the war. The Monarch hex tube bike, they called it. It's hex-shaped tubing rather than round tubing. And the neat thing about that bike is it's all aluminum, of course, and supposedly it was built from reclaimed World War II aircraft aluminum.
Oh, wow, that's a great story.
So
that's a great story. And this radio bike must have been inspirational for a Pee Wee Herman's show.
Could have been.
And then this one has really got a beautiful...
this J.C. Higgins bike sold by Sears is just a gorgeous bike. They put everything they could on it.
Is that a light?
Yes.
And then the red dot.
Taillights.
They used to use, in the 50s, they had a blue dot tail light for cars. I'm not sure what it did, but is that similar to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Got a front headlight,
And is this
front suspension, even put a skirt guard on a man's bike. And the tank in there has a horn.
That's very contemporary, skirt on a man's bike. Yeah. Is this a generator or a battery?
No, that's a battery.
Battery, okay.
That's a battery.
The color's great, too.
Yeah. You know, the styling.
The reflectors.
The J.C. Higgins custom flow, color flow with the front suspension on it. Of course, the Schwinn Phantom, which came in 3 colors, and the most popular one was the black Phantom. They also made a green one and a red one. But that was probably the Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz of bicycles. That was as good as it got. They weren't lightweight. They weighed a ton. That was probably a 65, 70-pound bike. They were heavy, but they were pretty indestructible. Schwinn had a lifetime warranty on their frames.
And their frames are beautiful. I want to ask you about how those were made. What was the price of that in 1955-ish? It was around $60, $68, something like that?
Yeah, around there.
Unbelievable. How did they make their frames? I noticed on the Schwinn bikes, all the joints are rounded and smooth. Is that a brazing process? And
Yes, it is. And they had 2 style frames. They came along with what they called the cantilever frame on that, which was a little different than more of a straight bar frame.
Okay.
But there was some just gorgeous bikes. One of my favorites is the Western Flyer X53.
I can't get over the way they've done this rack on the back. It's really something.
The Western Flyer was sold by Western Auto. If you remember, Western Auto sold car parts and
a little bit of everything.
And a lot of companies had bicycles branded for them, like Goodyear and BF Goodrich and Firestone, Western Auto.
Correct me if I'm, or fill me in on this, Roger. Certain bike manufacturers, if you ordered 100 bikes, you could order them with any name on them you wanted.
Yes. There's the department stores sold bikes with their name on them.
Or the local hardware store, a little neighborhood hardware, Jones's Hardware. Your bike could say that. I had a bike when I was a kid called a Gold Medal. I have no idea
who made it or
I have no idea.
Sold it. So, I love this Western Flyer because of the unique styling. If you look from the tank, the chrome piece runs all the way through the rack, all the way around, and then back through the chain guard. So it's an interesting styling design. Beautiful bike, beautiful bike.
Of this era bike, was Schwinn the number one, you think?
They were definitely way up there. Monarch was not as popular. Columbia was not as popular as they used to be. And of course, Sears still sold a ton of bikes under the J.C. Higgins name. Montgomery Ward sold bikes. They were called Hawthorns.
Yep, sure. I'll be darned. Well, the styling is off the charts as far as the time spent with each component.
Yeah, and you got some character bikes. There's a Hopalong Cassidy bike up there with 6 guns and saddlebags, and
yeah, imagine that, folks. You're buying a bicycle for your son in this day and age, and it comes with guns.
And the Donald Duck bike was very unique and interesting. The horn tank, you push the button, and the lights flashed in Donald's eyes, and it quacked. It didn't.
Oh my God!
So, a lot of character bikes back then.
Now, a lot of these tank bikes, they probably didn't have a female version or a girl's version, did they?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a girl's Donald Duck over there, and there's a girl's Hopalong Cassidy.
Okay. All right. Don't want to leave the
girls' bikes were
program.
never as popular as boys' bikes, and collecting bikes is interesting. You find some beautiful old girls' bikes because girls took better care of their bikes than guys. You know, guys are riding a bike and they jump off and let the bike go, and girls took care of them. So it's easier to find some nicer girls' bikes, but they're not as valuable.
Okay.
Boys' bikes are still more valuable than girls' bikes in general.
So it's easier to find a Survivor girls' bike that's all original and not too beat up, that doesn't need restoration, easier than it is to find a boys' bike.
Yes.
Because they also modified them. I modified every bike I had.
We all did.
I had to change everything.
Yep.
So, no doubt about it. Well, Roger, this is great. These bikes are just wonderful. Again, if you're looking for a Sunday drive or a Saturday afternoon visit to a very unique museum,
there's a website, Old Spokes Home of Grosse Ile.
Okay, Old Spokes Home of Grosse Ile.
You can find the website and can also make an appointment to come by.
Yeah, make an appointment. Call first because he's not open all the time, but he's very accommodating to groups and people who want to see the bikes. All right, now we're going to look at some bikes that I can remember. Mid-60s Stingrays. They're kind of the hot rod of the bicycle era, really. Roger, how many of these do you have? You've got one of every, possibly.
Of the crate bikes.
Oh, the crate bikes, yeah.
And there's various deluxe versions of the Stingrays, and I have several of those. So.
Okay, and I know that from talking to you earlier, the Stingray bike was sort of invented in California, like the skateboard and all the other cool stuff that we did in the 60s. So you have a bike here that's actually the kind of bike they cobbled up to make the first Stingray. How did that all happen?
What we think we know
is
that kids' bikes that was a typical deluxe kids' bike in that era, the 50s and early 60s. What we think we know is that kids in California started stripping them down, putting high-rise handlebars on them, banana seats, and that was a huge fan. Schwinn dealers got together, went to Schwinn, and said, "You have to make this bike." Schwinn said, "You're crazy," but the dealers talked him into it. And Schwinn came along with the Stingray, the first Stingray, which is the high-rise handlebars, a banana seat, and slick rear tire on it.
Like a drag slick?
Yeah, like a drag slick. and Schwinn absolutely went to the bank on those. They built various iterations of it, various models. Every bike manufacturer in the world copied them, copied those, and they became the kids' bike.
They really were popular when I was on my street. Everybody had one.
They came along with a deluxe version, and the first one was the Apple Crate. And what they did with that is they put a spring front suspension in it off some of their bigger bikes, put a 16-inch wheel, a smaller wheel on the front, and they put a 5-speed gear shifter on it. They ended up with 6 different versions of the crate bikes. The Apple Crate, the Orange Crate, the Gray Ghost, the Lemon Peeler, the Pea Picker, and the Cotton Picker. That was, if you're a kid, that was as good as it got.
But how long was it before the government stepped in?
Well, the government stepped in it was the early 70s. They said you can't use that stick shift. That's dangerous. They made them put reflectors on the wheels and the pedals, and government's got to have their hand in there.
Yeah.
But they built other versions. They built a tandem. They called it the Mini Twin. Little 20-inch tandem bike.
I've seen tandems, but never saw that one.
And they built a Schwinn Runabout, and that was an answer to some of the foldable bikes that were out there.
Oh, okay. You
could fold down the handlebars and pop the seat out and throw it in the trunk of your car.
Or put it on your boat.
Put it on your boat, yep. They came out with a big kids version of the Stingray called the Manta Ray.
Oh.
And that was had the bigger wheels than the Stingrays.
But a little bit more like a 10-speed. I mean, a little finer tires. And
they used the narrower tires. They did various versions of the Stingray with narrower tires called fastbacks. There's one up there with the unique ram's horn handlebars on it.
I remember those.
But those were generally called fastbacks. So Schwinn went to the bank on Stingrays.
They own the market. There's no doubt about it. And when I was a kid, any of the knockoffs just weren't the thing. You had to have the Stingray if you're any class at all.
The Stingrays, the Schwinn Stingrays, were still indestructible. Schwinn still had the lifetime warranty on the frame.
Oh, they did.
And they were just rock solid. They were just good. You can see the difference when you get into these and the quality of some of these bikes that vary from manufacturer to manufacturer.
Well, they had box stores back then. Like Sears would almost be a box store.
Yeah.
Montgomery Ward was a box store, so their bikes were simpler and made probably a little less money. Mm-hmm. But they did try to copy Schwinn. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And we'll see it. We'll see pictures.
Yes, Sears had a version of the Stingray.
In collecting, is because rarity is important. Mm-hmm. Since Stingrays were so prolific and so many, are they a little bit less valuable or less collectible than some of the oddball Huffys or some of the others? I
think so. The crate bikes are very collectible.
Oh.
And they're quite valuable. But even a nicely restored Stingray is still a very valuable bike.
Okay.
It's like restoring anything. It's expensive to restore the bikes.
Yeah.
The repainting, the rechroming, the respoking, the decals, and
hand grips and so on.
And even restoring a bike it's not what it costs to restore a car, but it's still fairly expensive. So any old bike that's restored properly is fairly valuable.
And I've read where one of these was controversial. Which one was the controversial one? Was it the Cotton Picker?
Could have been. Could have been.
I know it was limited production or very short-lived, maybe?
Yeah, that was one of the later ones they came out with.
Oh, it is, okay. All right. Well, I remember the colors. What do you remember the names of these colors? Like this green. Do you remember the?
I don't know. They called the bike the pea picker.
This is the pea
but
picker.
I don't know what the exact color was. And of course, the lemon peeler.
And I think the Springer front end, I call it the Springer front end, is sort of a motorcycle reminiscent of older motorcycles. But I'm sure there was a reason.
Well, the Springer front end
was way back.
On these evolved from the
earlier bikes. Earlier bikes, yeah.
Adult bikes with Springers.
And of course, the boys were so rough on them, it probably helped to keep the front ends together.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is good. These Stingray bikes are really something. They're the hot rods of bicycling, I think. Another really important aspect in the bicycle evolution is the gasoline motor. And Roger's got probably the most prominent motorized bicycle collection around here. Roger? Whizzer is the one that comes to my mind.
Yes.
And you've got some here. And Schwinn never made a bike with a motor, but they made a bike that would accommodate a motor.
Yes. The Whizzer motors got popular, and Whizzer, a company in Pontiac, Michigan, made a kit that you could mount on a bicycle. And it consisted of the motor, the drive system, throttle, and the gas tank. And you could mount that on really any bike. Schwinn built a beefed up version of their bicycle for use with the Whizzer motor. It was heavier spokes, some minor frame modifications, and you see a lot of Whizzers on Schwinn bikes, and they were actually sold separately. Interesting, this Schwinn Whizzer, the bike was $75. The Whizzer motor kit was $110. Whizzer kind of ticked off Schwinn because they decided to build their own frame bike, and
with a very unique front fork too.
Yeah.
Front suspension.
And that's a complete Whizzer bike, motorized bike. Whizzer also decided to build a motorcycle, and it's called a Sportsman. It's not a bicycle at all. It's actually a motorcycle, a small motorcycle.
It's almost like a 20-inch bike. It's so small.
Yeah.
It's not that small, but
yeah. And interesting bike is the
delivery bike.
Yeah, it's a delivery bike. It's got a small front wheel and a big basket on the front, and they were sold as bicycles for delivery back before there was Uber and
this has a pedal start. So you pedal it to get started.
It was a pedal bike, and then you could put a Whizzer kit on it.
Got it.
And
okay.
That's what that was.
So the pedal wasn't used to start the bike or get it started. It's just their auxiliary. It was already built for the pedal.
Yeah, generally you pedal it to get the motor going.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah, on all the Whizzers. And then there was the French Solex, who built a motorized bike. I don't know if people remember the Solex, but it actually put the motor on the front wheel, and it was a friction drive.
Now these were 50s, right?
I believe Whizzer actually started building the kits before World War II.
Oh, okay. I've never seen them before World War II. I have seen them after the war.
It's the 1950s that they became popular.
And then the Solex is more 60s, isn't it?
60s, 70s, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, the Solex. I remember those. I'll be darned. Well, we got some cool bikes here. So that's a lot of the evolution on bicycles, and the end is the gasoline power. So again, Roger, thank you. We're really happy to see these really cool machines.
Gasoline-powered bicycles have really gone by the wayside and been replaced in spades by electric bikes.
Electric, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not going to do a show on electric. They're not collectible as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. If you know a collector, or you are a collector, and you'd like to talk to me on this show about your collection, I'd love to have you. Contact me at bctvthecollectors@gmail.com.